Hey, Justin.
Hey, Jen.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to What Are You Listening To This Week, the weekly podcast where we talk about our favorite songs. Some old, some new, all good. I'm Jenn Tully, and this week I'm joined by singer-songwriter Justin Lantrip, whose latest album, Floodgates, is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you stream. On this week's episode, we're going to discuss the new album, highlight some favorite tracks, and get the stories behind the music from the artist himself. Also, did you know that now on Spotify, you can listen to the show with the songs we discuss incorporated? Just search for What Are You Listening To with Music. If you're not listening on Spotify, be sure to give the playlist a listen and then tune into our conversation. With that, let's get started. Justin, let's talk about Floodgates.
Sounds good to me.
All right. I'm super excited about this album. I'm glad you agreed to come on the show. And then to reward you, I gave you the impossible task of choosing just two songs from the album to discuss. I feel like, this album is such a vibe from beginning to end. It was hard for me to pick just two songs, so I know it must have been hard for you. But since I did give you the terrible, terrible assignment, please tell me, what's your first pick, Justin?
Well, you already picked two of my other favorites, so it made it easier. But I figured I'd start with Floodgates, its title track. And it's dear to my heart. This whole album really, a lot of it relates to the passing of my father, which was in 2013. He died from cancer and had a hard end. And this song is really just about some of the feelings around his passing and some of the things that get left unsaid, and the feeling of that you didn't open up enough and you didn't open up those floodgates and let yourself be who you wanted to be in those moments. You those regrets that sort of come in at the end there, and when you realize what you missed.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear that it's about the passing of your father. That was a theme that I kept writing over and over as I was listening to the album, is I'm so curious to know if this is about a specific incident or a specific person, because I felt like the whole album is so unfussy and intimate. It's almost like you invited us into your studio for a private performance, It really felt like I was there with you, with a small crowd, and it just felt so intimate. It felt like you were giving us a little glimpse into something that was really personal to you, yet I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was, and I loved that. It kept me listening to track after track. And the funny thing about our playlist that will go along with the show and the tunes that we pulled out is that, if this were a golf game, we really focused on the back nine, right? Like we kind of took tracks from the end of the album, but I really think from beginning to end I was intrigued, and I think Floodgates is a great example of something that you do really well that's different from any artist that I've listened to. And I'm curious to hear if it's conscious, if it's subconscious. You, in almost every single track, have an amazing opening lyric. And I don't know if that's something that you strive for, if you feel like, I've got to hook them in from the very beginning or they're lost, or if it's something that just happens organically. And what I'm talking about is like on Floodgates, you start with, can I give you this loneliness? And I just think like, wow, how many times have we felt that? Like, oh my gosh, if I could just hand this over to somebody else. But then will it become a really heavy burden for them to carry? I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about that. It really seemed like something that was a strength of yours. And I don't know, again, is that conscious? Is it subconscious? Can you tell me about it?
It's probably a little bit of both. I care a lot about lyrics for sure. And sometimes I'll go back and forth, when structuring a song. It's, you start with what you think is the right line, and then you come back to it later and realize it's totally needs to be flipped around. But, yeah, I don't know. I think I try to go by instinct as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to articulate deep emotion is difficult. I mean, it's something that takes a long time to get a grasp on. And, I mean, whenever you can really tap into that emotion, then I think words just can kind of come from that feeling more than trying to think it out. It's more like just trying to figure out how to find that whatever that synchronicity is with something deep. It just kind of can lead itself. But it comes from everything that you've read and everything that you've thought and discussed in your life too. So it's both conscious and subconscious, I think.
It's so
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's
recognition, though.
it's so amazing to me, just the again, I think you and I talked about this before we started recording, is that getting a glimpse into people's creative process has been such a cool sort of side effect of hosting the show. And so it is amazing to me when someone says, like it just kind of happens subconsciously, or sometimes it just flows, or, it's my form of catharsis, or, whatever the case may be. It's just so amazing to me that people don't even oftentimes have an explanation that they can articulate, which again just reminds me like what a gift that is. It's such a gift, and maybe it comes from somewhere that we can't explain. But
I mean, you have to show up. You have to show up and you have to do the work for sure. There's no getting around that. And I think sometimes it's like in the 11th hour that the inspiration strikes. It's after a lot of hitting your head against the wall and not feeling like you nailed it, or not feeling like that's the right thing to say, and then it comes, So, the creative process is I mean, it's a I don't really know. Yeah, like you said, it's hard to articulate. It's easier when you're singing something. It's different than talking about something.
Yeah.
It creates a whole different world that all those words can kind of sit in, and you can translate this emotion that you feel without just saying something, and that makes a big difference. And so it's more difficult to talk about it than it is to sing it,
Yeah. That's so interesting. And you can, again, you can feel that in the song. You have a lyric in Floodgates that says, "Open all of your floodgates, open all of your closed doors." And I'm like, wow, what a vulnerable position to be in if we could do that. Again, it felt really, really intimate. And I was so grateful that you kind of led us into this, what felt like a really vulnerable space.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think that's sort of the trick of trying to, mine your own experience to seek clarity for yourself, but for culture in general. I mean, that's sort of the goal. And if anybody feels that, then you did your job.
Yeah, well, beautiful. And I love this track, and I love that it's the title track. I think it's a good first place to go on the album if you're one of those people that refuses to listen from beginning to end. Do you have friends like that are just like, no, I won't listen from beginning to end? I'm a big the artist did this purposely. Yeah, I'm like, I want to listen the way.
I did struggle trying to figure out how to lay these tracks out. It's not easy, but I mean, you appreciate that. I think there was some, there's definitely some intent be in the way that I laid them out. But at the same time, I mean, we live in this. It's hard to let anybody have the time to listen to an entire album in one sitting. So if you're going to poke around, start with that.
A good jumping off point. Well, then tell me about your second pick. What was your second pick from the album?
This is The Only Enemy, which was it turned out as one of my favorites, just in terms of the production as much as anything on the album, and which was really tricky. I engineered and produced it with myself, but a buddy of mine helped me kind of arrange all the material and played a bunch of the different parts on there. His name's Matt Donahue. And this one, for whatever reason, just had like a nicer low end, and the way the drums came together, and just in terms of the engineering aspects, it felt really clean, and it's really hard to do. I really, speaking of beating my head against the wall, did that with the bass and the drums of the track, because it's just really difficult to get those things to come together and sound unified and full. And that's where the pros come in to help you. But
Yeah.
so
Well,
but just in the production sense, I really loved it for that reason. But this track also kind of is off of the track about my father, and it was kind of stolen a little bit from something older that I did in terms of the riff, and then piecing together the lyrics. It's much more about sort of a futuristic viewpoint of saying where we should put our faith, and our hope is in ourselves, and basically what we can invent is what we will become if we just put our heart and mind into it.
I love that. And this song feels like a totally different vibe to me. You immediately are drawn into this one, and it's funny that you called that out. Again, I'm a big lyrics person. We talk about them on the show a lot, and the lyrics that I called out from this song were the ones that you've just said. And all we can invent is all we can become. I'm like, wow, how great is that? Because when I first listened to The Only Enemy, it kind of reminded me of like, really the only enemy is that voice inside your head telling you can't do something, like
Right.
I call it the shadow side a lot. And I talk about shadow songs, the songs that I listen to that articulate that for me, that help me kind of put it away whenever I am having that sort of negative self-talk. And I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about, being the only enemy, but for me, that's what really came through on the track. Is that kind of what you were drawing on as well?
The only enemy being yourself and your own voice in your head that's always telling you can't do something. And it is that in the individual sense, but it's also in the broad sense of culture, and just saying not believing, and not having a narrative that actually creates a beautiful vision of what the future could be. We seem really misaligned in that. Everything's so negative and so downtrodden, and of course there's some truth in that, but we also just need to figure out, well, what can we make it? What is the beautiful vision that we can all strive towards and collectively imagine and then become.
So agree. I so agree. And it's such a driving principle of the show too. Like we always talk about, you can find the good in any song. And the more I think we can find the good and the possibility in one another, the better off we'll all be in the long run. I have one more question about the song before we jump into my favorite tracks from the album. Tell me about the row your boat ending. I love that, and that's a little bit of a spoiler alert for one of my picks. But you end the song with the traditional, kind of it's the song everybody knows, "Row Your Boat," but it's done in almost a melancholy way. But it's so beautiful and so captivating. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I mean, it was kind of, I guess just sort of came from the subconscious, maybe just from writing the other song to a degree, and trying to sort of tie the album back into this idea of seeing another future too. So it's sort of like a link to that song, the other song that I wrote, which has no relation to the old "Row Your Boat."
Yes.
The original song, but I mean, it just kind of felt like it tied the two ideas together, I guess, is really what it boiled down to.
Yeah, I liked it, and I thought it was a cool choice. It's nice to finish on something like really familiar like that. For when I gave the album a first listen from beginning to end, it was just like, it was like my final exhale before I blew out the candle, that I had lit while listening to the album, because again, it is just so intimate and unfussy. I know I keep saying that, but those are the notes that I wrote over and over again while listening. So I loved that. I thought it was a really cool way to sort of end or transition out of the album into the next thing that I was listening to, which ironically ended up being the Beastie Boys. So that was like a jolt to the system to go from this amazing, like beautiful, moody
I don't
album
know
to
what you mean.
like jumping out into like Paul's Boutique. I was like, whoa, 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 that's not what I'm looking for right
Yeah.
now. um, well, for
Shock to the
my,
system.
it was a shock. It was a little bit of a shock. And I kind of wanted to go back to where I was before. So I just gave the album a second listen, if I'm being totally honest.
I appreciate that.
It's really I enjoyed it a lot, and that's a nice segue into my first pick, which is a song called "If I Could See the Future," and obviously this is unscripted in case you couldn't tell, listeners, but what a nice segue into the previous conversation we were having, right? If the only enemy is sort of this idea of envisioning a future that is whatever we want it to be. I loved the, that we're transitioning straight into "If I Could See the Future." This is another one that, like, right from the beginning, you sucked me in, because the first line in this song is, "My good friend thinks I will die first. I tell him I'm more afraid I'll die last." And I'm like, he did it again. He hooked me in, like, right from Jump Street with the lyrics. So can you tell me more about this song? And if is this really about a friend, or is this like
Yeah.
asking for a friend? I'm air quoting.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Yeah, for sure. It's my best friend who also unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer, and he's fortunately still around. He's had a long life so far since he was diagnosed, so we were lucky there. But yeah, I mean, he always had this strange dream that I would be one of the first of our friend group to die, and so it was like he was worried that it was a premonition. Mm-hmm. And that always stuck in my head, and so when he was diagnosed, it was kind of clear, or it felt like it would not be true, and that it would have been him. And I just felt like, it's not the worst thing to die first. It's the worst to die last, because then you have to watch everybody.
Yeah, so true. And I think that musically, this is my favorite song on the track. I think I have my second pick is my favorite all around favorite. But musically, I really like this song. Can you talk to me about, did you play all the instruments on this track? How did this track come together from a music standpoint?
I mean, pretty much on almost all the tracks, all I did was the acoustic and the vocals and the layers of vocals. My friend Matt played the bass, and he played electric guitar, and he played keyboards, and then we had a drummer that came up from Portland, which was a friend from Matt's. His name was Joe Sanders, and we just, that one was really tough to figure out. The more that we tried to add to it to sort of bring it to life, the more it actually felt like it was kind of removing the feeling from it. So in the end, we kept stripping things back out of it and making it feel more raw. And once it got back there, it felt better. It felt more like what it was meant to translate as. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long, it's kind of ballady in a way. It's almost Dylan-esque, and the verses are really long, and it makes the song really long, which is kind of been a thing of mine for a long time. I have trouble writing short songs, so but yeah, I mean, I really
well, when you're good at it, you write a long song.
If you got a lot to say, you got to say it.
Right. I enjoy it. And I think, again, I talked to you a little bit about this. My vocabulary is a little bit different because I'm not a musician. So I often deal in comparisons because that's what I'm able to talk about. But throughout, I kept getting, and it's always dangerous to do this with another singer-songwriter, compare them to somebody else. But I agree with the reference to Dylan. I also got a lot of like Father John Misty and Ray LaMontagne. Like, I don't know if those are people that you like or feel influenced by, but that's kind of, those are some other artists that I kept kind of like getting vibes of as I was going through the album, especially on like, second, third
I don't know
listen.
if you recognized my don't know if you recognize my hat, but
I
it's
don't. What is it?
FJM on there.
Oh, it's a Father John Misty. Well, then that
It's
makes
Father John
sense.
Misty.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, that's what I
yeah,
got a lot
yeah.
through
No,
this. And
he's one of my favorites for sure.
yeah, so good. So good. Which takes us into my final pick and my favorite song on the album. We alluded to a little bit earlier, but it's a song called Row Your Boat. Now, the song is, like we mentioned, not the traditional. Again, if you want to hear the original "Row Your Boat," you can listen to "The Only Enemy" and get the original song. But yeah, this one ended up being my favorite. I love the chord progressions in this song. I love the piano. It's so pretty. It's so sweet. There's this line that
Yeah.
says, "Gonna lay right here, feel time flow." And I'm like, oh, it's just an immediate slowdown. Like this song just felt to me like, take a breath, breathe it in, relax. And I loved this song and just kept going back to it again and again and again. So I am curious because Row Your Boat or that theme kind of appears twice. Again, just that it just happened organically. It was just a way to sort of tie the two together, or is there some significance to Row Your Boat?
Well, I mean, my dad was an amazing fisherman, so that was probably, if there's anything that I would define him as, at least in his character, it was a fisherman and somebody who was always out on the water. So, I mean, that played a role for sure, and just the idea of just putting one step in front of the other. When tragedy happens, and when you have something really hard to deal with, you don't really have a choice. You just kind of have to keep rowing. You just have to keep pushing forward and taking the next step, and then what will be will be. So that's really what this sort of is about. My dad, he got up like a day before he died, and he just said, he said, it's not fair, no one knows. And I just said, well, that's true, but I think because individually nobody does know what it's like to be somebody else ultimately, but of course we all have to face the same thing in the end. So it's true that no one knows, but it's kind of true that everybody knows. So
Yeah.
that's where that line came from. It's not fair, no one knows. Dad, you got to row your boat. You just got to
Yep.
keep rowing.
I love that, and that's again we nailed it because that's the exact lyric that I called out. It's not fair, no one knows, and you say "Dad" in the first verse, or the first time, and then "Son" the second time. You got to row your boat, and I was just like, ooh. That's that one was really impactful for me, and again, now that I know sort of the basis or the genesis of the idea for this album, it all seems a lot more clear, and I just thank you for being so vulnerable. You don't get to say that to singer-songwriters or artists that you love that have given you a song that really sums up an emotion. So I just thank you for your vulnerability on this album. I felt it, and we talked about this a little bit last week. It came up, so it's strange that it's coming up again, but I lost my mom in 2018, and so hearing this was strangely comforting, even though I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was about for some reason, and maybe again it's because you make the dad and son reference in Row Your Boat. It brought me a lot of comfort. We just passed the 4-year anniversary of the day that she died, and that happened to be one of the days I was doing some show prep. And so I got 2 songs really that kind of saved me that day. And one was from an episode last week. And then your song, the song that I chose, Row Your Boat, was the second. So again, thank you for the vulnerability. Thank you for sharing. And again, here we are relating about something that we never even knew we were both going through. And it saved you, it saved me. I think that that's the magical thing about music, and why I'll never stop listening and never stop being curious about how these songs come into the world.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you. It's
Well,
been my
thank
pleasure
you.
for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this album with me. It's been on high constant rotation in my house since I first got a hold of it. So if you all are curious to listen to the whole album, you can listen to Floodgates, the new album by Justin Lantrip, in its entirety on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you stream. To our listeners, please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.